you want to learn how to tune electronic fuel injection live in person with the guys from RealTuners? We have 2-day courses in dyno shops all across the country. You can register for these at RealTuners.com and click on RealTuners Live Classes. For more information or to make a reservation, go to RealTuners.com or message us on Facebook at RealTuners LLC. Now, about those classes. When are they, you might ask? Standalone EFI Level 1 in Norwalk, Ohio on January 19th and 20th at Pusher Racing. Mopar Factory ECU Training, January 26th and 27th at Trip Pro Motorsports in Palm Bay, Florida with Rick Tapp. Standalone EFI Level 1 course, February 23rd and 24th in Las Vegas at Revolution Street Cars. On March 2nd, a special 1-day advanced course at Dynacom Industries in Fort Worth, Texas. April 13th and 14th, a Level 1 EFI course at Endless Performance in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. April 27th and 28th, an advanced class at 417 Motorsports in Springfield, Missouri. May 18th and 19th, standalone EFI Level 1 class at 417 Motorsports in Springfield, Missouri. June 15th and 16th, a Level 2 advanced course in Milwaukee, Wisconsin at Endless Performance. And of course, we will be trying to schedule more classes and more dates throughout the year, so keep checking back for more info. Sometimes we have a special guest, sometimes we don't. Tonight, you're the special guest. You ask the questions, we give the answers. Anything related to these automotive obsessions of ours and how to make them go faster. Now, who exactly is this we that I'm talking about? Rye Klemp from Clapped Out. Bill Fowler of Big Hat Racing. James Short of Shore Tuning. John Bewley of Little John's Motorsport Solutions. Mark Dalquist of Throttles Performance. Scott Clark of RealTuners.com. Scott Evans of Helix Tuning. Tom Sewell of Fuel Injector Development. Dan Parker, the movie star. He's blind in one eye and can't see out the other. And possibly a few of our previous guest hosts will pop their heads in and chat as well. And as always, thanks for tuning in. Now let's get this show on the road.
So, Mr. Bewley, how are you this evening?
Tired.
Hey. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to another Wednesday night podcast here on RealTuners. Somebody else say hi. Everybody's here.
Hey.
How's it going? Hey, woo! Happy Wednesday.
Well, it's Wednesday at least. I don't know about the happy part.
It's almost weekend. I saw a post, John, that you're a little bit busy right now.
Just a little. I had some issues arise. I had to take a couple of days away from the office that were unplanned. Just a little emergency with the family, and 2 days, and I got three times as many voicemails and emails and contacts to make back versus what I was off for 2 weeks for Christmas.
Have you
working on it though? We got half of them knocked out. I got half the voicemails knocked out yesterday and today. So
okay,
anytime you can return more voicemails than get left for you, you're making progress at least.
So we've got John Bewley on from Little John's tonight. Scott Evans is doing the audio, Helix Tuning. Mike Matajasic is here. I think we're going to talk some land speed stuff today, Mike. Is that the plan?
Yeah, we can. Sure can.
That would be great.
And then I think there's another person here without a name, the 712 number that's on tonight. Do you know who that is, Scott?
Give me a second. I'll figure that out.
I'm just on his iBill,
That
so I
might
don't
just
think it
be
should
Mary.
show a number.
No, she's on a separate one. So
Well, I don't
anyway,
know.
so we're doing a tech question and answer tonight, and we're going to talk a little bit about land speed record racing, and we're already got our first question here. Mike Hool's bus. Mark, I'm going to have to show you my 4L60 that competed drag week after listening to episode 69. Oh, because we were picking on 4L60s. You'll always find someone that says, yeah, you can make it live, or you can do this, or you can do that. But let's face it, a Turbo 400 with a gear vendors behind it is inherently a better design than a 4L60. Not saying that if without enough effort and treating it properly, you couldn't make a 60 work, but they aren't known for their durability. And I've broken stock 4L60s on the first wide open 2-3 upshift of a 450 horse engine. I mean, they aren't all that tough.
I'd take a glide with the gear vendors over a 4L60.
Yeah, they just, they aren't. There are people that make them work, but I would never put a 4L60 behind a big block. Nothing that makes any torque.
Been there, done that. Brand new monster out of the box. It lasted 2 miles.
Well, see, that's a double. To be honest with you, that's a double dumbass move. First, you did a 4L60. Second, you got it from Monster.
Well, right. That was about 5 years ago we bought the thing, something like that. Yeah, 5 years ago.
Yeah, you just got double whammied on that deal.
Yeah, they sent me another one. It's still in the car. It hasn't broke yet, so we'll see. I gingerly, my dad drives it now, so it's a ginger drive most of the time. But I make sure that I don't let it shift at wide open throttle. So I let out before it shifts. 30
degrees of timing pulled at 6,800 RPM.
It's carburetor,
80.
yeah. There's none of that crap.
Oh,
that's
unfortunate.
Yeah, it's yeah. I wish I could pull the timing out of it. Yeah, because it's a pretty stout big block, so it's no joke.
Any throttle position over 65%, timing reduced to 10 degrees.
Yeah, I wish. Trust me, I'm thinking about putting an LS in it because the thing's only got like 500 miles on it, 600 miles on the whole car. My brother and I drove it in high school, and my dad basically did a full frame off restoration on the car. It's absolutely beautiful, but the big block is just way too much, man. It is just it's got dart heads on it and a solid roller for the streets, 432 cubic inches, and it just blows the tires off anywhere, any mile per hour. It's just it's way too much for a 65-year-old man to drive putt around town.
Did you say a 432?
Yeah, it's a 432.
So it's a
block. No, it's a big block.
I'm kidding.
Yeah.
I want to make. Yeah, and the rest of the quote is, so you're going to put an LS in it so it doesn't hurt the transmission. I just wanted to make sure everybody heard that correctly.
Right. Yeah. I'm talking like a 5.3 with a cam naturally aspirated. Yeah. Something a little more docile.
I get it. I'm just having a little fun. Yeah, I gotta have a little fun. I'm not going to be on here long.
Come on, Mike. You got to give the guy who's a big block Ford naturally aspirated guy. You got to give him a little bit of room to try and get his digs in.
Oh, gotcha.
Otherwise he gets kind of cranky if you go 2 or 3 shows and he doesn't get to poke at something.
Yeah. The problem with the Monster transmission is I'm afraid to put it on the dyno and make a full throttle pull. That's
I'd be afraid of it too.
Yeah, I'm kind of scared of that. I just I mean, it did last longer than the 1 mile the first one lasted. Yeah, it lost third gear altogether. So it hit third gear one time and then it didn't exist after that. So.
Making extra neutrals every day of the week.
Oh, it sure did. It was a mess.
Don Abonate is asking a couple of questions. He needs some advice for fuel to finally tune to my new build. I just created an air-to-water intercooler for my small block Chevy twin-turbo Holly Dominator-powered Chevelle. Well, the fuel advice would be how much boost and what are your intentions with it? Because you could have 91 octane, you could have E85, you could have methanol, you could have C16, or any number of about 50 other fuels that are available. So what is it, a street car? Is it a race car? What are you going to do with it? how much boost do you plan to run? What kind of intake temperatures do you plan to run? There's a lot of questions to that before, you make a fuel recommendation. But if you're going to run alcohol, I like methanol. If you're going to run gasoline, I like C16. If you're going to be on the street, just tune it for 91 and deal with it, because you can make 700-800 horse on 91, which is more than enough to be out of control on the street anyway. And then he also wants a timing curve up to 24 pounds of boost. Well, that's going to be engine dependent. Just be very, very careful. Start out with less time and work your way up to it, because 24 pounds of boost, depending upon the fuel, C16 is going to want more timing than E85. But you could on 91 octane, you're not going to make 24 pounds on 91 probably. So let's not worry about that. And Barrett Nelson wants to know, how high of an intake air temp will C16 tolerate?
Higher than the IAT sensor will read.
I've melted an IAT sensor and never had a problem with C16. So figure you're 300 plus degrees to do that easily.
C16 will tolerate heat better than E85 will.
Andy Netherland.
E85 doesn't tolerate heat any better than gasoline.
Well, true, but
Andy Netherland, what tuning changes would you make when going from quarter mile to half mile racing?
What's the
everything
setup?
Temperature dependent?
Yeah, what's the setup? Yeah, Andy, comment on what your setup is: turbos, nitrous, whatever it may be.
This is an interesting question. I'm not sure where we're going with it. Is there any benefit to stopping the cold air intake tube right before the turbo and not connecting it?
The answer to that question is depends. Depends on what the map sensor you plumb to that intake tube says when you test it. So you run that inlet tube to the turbocharger, get a 2-bar map sensor, plumb it pre-compressor, and if you make a pull and it's pulling vacuum, then you need to disconnect it and let it stop a 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch before it hits the compressor housing.
I have a quick question that goes back to that fuel question, Mark. Are we as a group pretty much categorically determined that the idea of trying to cheat with water meth injection on pump gas stuff is just a bad plan? Don't do it. That seems to be the net of it, but I thought we'd clarify that for the audience.
I don't know anyone who thinks it's a good idea.
But do we really want to get that rant started again tonight?
Okay, I'm like I say, people ask, the fuel question, and anytime you see something like this in a post somewhere on the interwebs, someone is going to say, "Oh yeah, just use water meth and it'll make 1,000,000 horsepower."
Well, it's the interwebs. What do you expect?
Times.
Everybody's a tuning expert and everybody's a hero.
It's under ideal conditions, you can patch it or make it work, but one tiny little thing changes and boom. So when we start talking about the kind of power that you're making, and this, like Don Abonate, he's looking at 24 pounds of boost to make 1,300 horsepower. Well, so this, to me, when we're talking about a 1,300 horsepower car, this is not what you would call a budget program. There are people that say, junkyard 5.3, this and that. But if you're actually going to get 1,300 horsepower down the racetrack and do it well, this isn't a low budget program. We've got money tied up into it. So why wouldn't you just run decent fuel? Why would you try and get by on $2 a gallon or $2.50 a gallon fuel when you've got this much money wrapped up in your car? And you blow the motor up, you put the oil pan out the bottom, you put oil under the tires, you crash the car. What was that? What was the fuel worth? I don't understand shorting yourself on fuel. 2,400 pounds of boost at 1,300 horse. You could do that with E85. You could do it with methanol, and you could do it with C16. All three of those fuels would work. I'm not a huge fan of ethanol, so if it was a street car, I'd look at C16, and if it was a excuse me, if it was a pure drag race car, I would consider methanol, but there is higher fuel system maintenance.
Where the methanol can come in handy as a water meth substance is way forward in the intake stream to cool down the air, so it fully evaporates before it gets into your engine. In general, my own personal tests, 10 to 12% is about all you get before you stop seeing cooling, and that's 10 to 12% of total fuel flow. So if you're flowing 150 pounds per hour of fuel at that moment, 15 pounds of it can be water meth and still see some good cooling and have it fully evaporate. And beyond that, it starts just being fluid that gets in, and then you run into distribution issues because it's going to skew your air-fuel ratio that your O2 sensor is seeing. It may be correct and way different at that point. You're going to have lean spots in some cylinders because of the fuel going into certain cylinders and not into other ones. So you got to be real careful because all of a sudden you got, it looks fine on the O2 sensor. It shows it's way rich, but you got one hole that's barely getting any of it. And then you get an ashtray out of it.
Look, right. Dad, I made you an ashtray.
Yeah, and it was never designed to be an octane crutch. It was designed to be an air cooling thing. It was designed to cool the air. Cold air, dense air creates horsepower. The cooler you can get it, 100 degrees of temperature is at 1,000 horsepower level is another 100 to 150 horsepower on some cars.
The problem you run into is distribution. If you end up getting a cylinder that's not getting good distribution, and you're pushing the tune-up hard, you got a problem.
Well, if you're only using it for cooling, then the distribution doesn't matter.
Right. And that's
because you're not fueling the motor on it. The minute you go past using it to try and cool the air charge and get that benefit, and you start using kits for something that they weren't meant to do, which is put fuel in the motor as fuel, you start having problems.
Now, a couple companies make a direct port water meth kit, which is a little bit better going that way, but it still has distribution issues.
Of having it up the airstream.
Yep.
I mean, the closer you get it to the intake valve, the less time you have for the latent heat of evaporation to work on the air.
Yeah.
You have to depend upon mechanical vaporization to do the job. Well, mechanical vaporization can't do the job 110% in 3 inches of run at 8,000 RPM.
And so Don was asking, he should have been more specific. He said he was looking to milk as much out of the cooler setup as he can. So Q16 versus C16 methanol, it seems Q16 is the most potent with low ITs. I wouldn't run Q16 in a boosted effort. I don't really. It's not that is a fuel that's a little bit finicky, and I don't like what it does to cylinder walls. I would just run C16 if I was going to run gas and give up the extra couple of horsepower. But if you're looking to get as much out of the cooler, methanol is going to do much better than either C or Q.
What do you mean get the most out of the cooler? I don't understand that statement.
He's adding a water to air cooler, and he wants to push it as hard as he can. That's how I'm reading it. But if you're going to want to push cooling, I'd go right to methanol.
I mean, if it's got an air to water on it, Q's just nasty. That stuff the stuff in it is just nasty. I mean, if you're going air to water, C16 would be fine. Q, if you want to deal with it. The problem with Q is like Mark said, it's just a finicky fuel. It goes bad. If you unseal a 5-gallon pail, you've got like 3 or 4 days to use it before it shit goes flat quicker than soda pop. And you can smell the difference on it. But it just, for the power level you're talking, dude, you can make, if this is the 1,300 horsepower guy, you can do that on C16 air to air, with enough
very easily.
So I think you're worrying about a non-issue. You just need to put the motor on C16 and run it and be done.
3,200-pound car running 8 O's, air-to-air intercooler, never saw above 160 IAT beating on it. Hot lapping sometimes.
I mean, I'm a proponent of air to waters. I much prefer air to water than I do an air to air. And I'll run an ambient water temp air to water before I'll run an air to air. But, I think you're trying to split hairs and make decisions on things that you're never going to run the combination down to where you're going to see a difference between one or the other.
There's my E85 nut hugger. Hildebrand, how's it going?
Oh, God, here we go.
Hey, I love E85 too.
E85, poor man's race fuel.
So
that's right.
We got Chase Griffiths he says his friend has a 3-valve turbo Mustang pump gas. He has a race coming up and he wants to turn up the boost a little bit. Is there a fuel he can run or mix with pump gas just to bump the octane up to prevent knock without having to change the tune-up?
C16.
Go get some Norco 112.
But don't just add it. Just drain the pump gas. If you're going to get after it, just drain the pump gas out, put C16 in it, and then you're safe and you're not going to hurt it.
The spark difference that C16 wants over pump gas, yes, it probably wants a few more degrees of spark, but it gives you the ability to creep up on it pretty easy. It handles a lot more tolerance to everything. If you just mix if you splash in a gallon, you don't have a full guarantee that you have an even distribution in your tank, even though it's sloshing around. Over time, yes, it's going to even out, but you can still have little pockets where it doesn't quite do the job. And you got to remember, you're trying to cut octane up. How much octane does it take to make it safe? Well, if you're only a fifth of it in C16, then you've only added a fifth of whatever that octane value is to your existing. You can do math and find out what the new octane is. Did you really bump it up to from 91 up to 94? I mean, is it really going to help you there? To get the benefits, you're looking at 116 octane. Why not leave it at 116 octane with C16 straight?
Andy Netherland, can you do me a favor and gather all those last 4 or 5 comments of your question together and put it in one comment in the feed so we can see it all at the same time? I've been trying to go back and chase it to answer your question, but you split it up in 5 or 6 different comments, and I can't chase them all down and put them in order.
Jake Miller 6. Anything special needed when planning fuel system to run the C16? And could you switch between 93 for cruising and then C16 for race through the same injector? Absolutely.
Yeah, the stoked on those are close enough. You could run the same ones, no problem.
Right, Bewley, Andy Netherland had it's LSX twin 7675s air to air on C16, 14 to 1500 horsepower. It's a true real street drag week car. Andy's going to be you're going to be about 15 seconds at wide open throttle, 13 to 15 seconds at wide open throttle. And at air to air, you're going to really want to watch the IATs on that thing because they're going to start going through the roof.
You need to start on. Oh, you're the quarter mile to half mile guy.
Yeah, quarter mile to half mile guy. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. With that situation, you need to really start ramping some extra fuel in. Pick an IAT. Do some research and do some data logging, and ramp some fuel in and nose your air fuel ratio over just a little bit, riching it up. With as coolant temp rises, IAT rises, things of that nature. Consider, richening it up to
just make it fatter.
half a point, and
or more,
and maybe take a degree or two of timing out of it.
I was going to say at least take 2 degrees out of it. Yeah, I mean it's going to be a difficult task to just get it to hook up with 14 or 1500. But yeah, you're going to be probably double the wide open throttle of a normal quarter mile pass.
Yeah, and you just need to, like I said, you just need to take into consideration and make changes in your tune-up for the quarter mile to half mile portion of the run, and fatten it up, take some timing out, and you can do tables that'll do that automatically for you based on IAT, coolant temp, things like that. Is how I would build the tables to take that out and put that fuel in.
Yeah, and creep up on it too, man. Don't be the guy who goes out there wide open throttle for the first half mile, because they got rollbacks at all those half mile events for a reason. They use them frequently.
Right.
Get past your quarter, or just past the quarter mile. go another second or two and shut it down and see where you're at. I mean, that little bit of time.
Yeah, do a plug reading on a half-mile run just like you would a quarter-mile run.
Yeah.
You know, and start it out fat. I mean, start out and reaching it up a full point. If you're 12 and a half on C16, you know, run the thing down, you know, figure out either time-based or IAT temp-based or coolant temp-based. When you get out there, fatten that thing up a full point. Take 3 or 4 degrees out of it. And then if that runs and it does fine, then pull it back where it only takes 3 degrees out, then 2 degrees out. You know, John Coleman, who has run his quarter-mile car at the half-mile up at French Lick, Indiana, he says he always went 1/10 of an AFR richer over the last half of the half-mile run at about 1/10 increase every second. So he did his based over time.
That sounds about right for what I've done on them. Is usually over time, and you can kind of just as it goes every second add a little more, a little more, a little more. It's a good starting way to do it, and then you can work out the differences of the IAT afterwards.
And don't forget to pull timing out too.
Right.
Can you crutch the air-to-air intercooler with a overspray of nitrous or CO2 or something?
You could, but it dilutes really quick.
Okay.
For something like that, it'd just be better to run an air-to-water with a really big tank.
Jason Robertson wants to know, on nitrous cars, how do you go about getting timing retard correct in the ramp-in period of a progressive system? And I guess
lots of trial and error.
Yeah, but as I ramp the nitrous in, I ramp the timing out. I mean, you're better safe than sorry, you know.
Most people are just ramping timing out quicker than they ramp the nitrous in, because as long as the timing goes out quicker than the nitrous comes in, you stay farther away from the ragged edge and putting holes in pistons and making ashtrays or change trays. For our non-smokers.
A good way to start to figure out how much you're going to do is you can flow exactly what you're doing. You can figure out have your solenoids flowed with your jets, with everything, have somebody do it and figure out exactly how much it flows at a 40% pulse, at a 50% pulse, right? And then from that point, once you know the flow, you can kind of dial it in that way for timing. It's, you know, if you're only flowing 50% of the nitrous, then you need the timing of whatever that amount is. If you got a 200 shot and you're pulsing it and it does flow only 100 at a certain rate, then hey, put in the timing for the 100 shot, not the 200 shot at that point, and you can ramp it back up.
The best way to model that is to monitor nozzle pressure, because a certain duty cycle might vary on the nozzle pressure over time. So if you think about a solenoid pulsing at 40% for 5 seconds, you know, it might be really low pressure initially, but after 5 seconds, it might actually be equalized to the actual bottle pressure, depending on how much jet you have and how big the solenoid is.
Yep, and all that can be plotted. You know, send it in to somebody who that's what they do.
Yep.
Jake wants to know that coolant pressure was discussed in a previous podcast. How much give is there in head gaskets to use coolant pressure data as a tuning aid? Small block Chevy, $12 Felpros, half-filled block, and aluminum heads.
That's pretty much an on-off situation.
Yeah, I don't think it could be used as a tuning window at all. It's more of a safety, in my opinion, because once you've reached the point of where it's lifting the head and pressurizing the coolant system, the heads need to come off and put new gaskets on.
Yeah, that's not a progressive notification style thing. It either tells you screwed up or you didn't screw up.
Yeah, that's kind of like the little red thing that pops out of your turkey when you cook it at Thanksgiving. You know, it's done when that thing pops out. And the coolant pressure's
you got turkey jerky if you wait till that thing pops out.
And as long as you have a baseline that you know is a good run where it is safe and nothing is happening, you'll have something to follow that it'll be very obvious when you see a huge spike that pops up suddenly compared to what you're used to seeing.
You have to be careful on a lot of mechanical pump cars. Like I have coolant pressure on my car, and I still run a mechanical water pump, and I build a lot of pressure in my system, even though it's not lifting the head gasket. So Scott said is one of the best things you can do. Is
building pressure is different than a sudden spike. Right, you're going to see a spike in the pressure. It's not going to a build of pressure is fine. You always get some mechanical buildup that way. You know, it has no choice. RPM goes up with a mechanical pump. It's going to build pressure. There's no choice but to do that. So,
common sense says if you make a run at like 10 pounds and a tune-up with like a super stupid safe tune-up, that you're not going to be causing any stress to the head gaskets based on cylinder pressure. So you can make a run and get a baseline of coolant pressure that's purely mechanical, you know, provided by the cooling system itself. And then you have a baseline to work off of. Yep. And then you can see if anything above that, when you start leaning on the tune-up, anything above that, it'd be like, okay, well, I need to look at this. I need to be concerned about that. We can't tell you what normal pressure is, Jake. You have to find that out for yourself.
Yeah, I've had
on your truck.
I've had a couple different setups in my own personal car, and the coolant pressures were completely different between the two. And most of it was sensor location and just the type of pump that I was using.
Yep.
And I have noticed that, you know, common sense says the hotter the coolant temp gets, the more pressure that it builds. So, you know, there's certain instances where in the heat of summer, sitting in staging lane, starting and stopping and carrying on, you know, the coolant temp gets up to 190, 200 degrees. And, you know, the thing's got 16 to 20 PSI of coolant pressure. And that's normal because, I mean, the cap pressure is 21 PSI or so.
Right.
So,
yeah, this is not something that we can, you know, we can't build you a curve for you to look at and reference, you know, over the podcast. You're going to have to go out and put a little work in and do a little data logging and figure out what your truck is going to make during normal operating, you know, during normal operation. And then you can go back and figure out, you know, you can use that as a baseline to compare if you ever have a problem and you exceed that baseline.
And don't be surprised if the pressure you see is higher than your cap pressure. Like on my car, it's higher than what the cap pressure is with no issues. So with the mechanical pump, you're spinning real fast, especially if you're spinning 7,000, 8,000 RPMs. The pressure will be a lot higher than what you think.
Yeah, 28 to 30 PSI is not uncommon.
Yeah, I've almost got to the point where I start building a derivative table for the safeties to where it'll actually monitor the actual increase in pressure rather than what the actual pressure is.
So you're looking for that change.
Yeah, you're looking for the delta change over a certain amount of time. And because, I mean, you know, I've got data logs of head gaskets lifting or the heads lifting. And I mean, it's a defined spike. I mean, within a tenth of a second, it jumps, you know, 10, 15, 20 PSI. So.
How about Barrett Nelson? Will C16 show signs on the plugs indicating where its IAT limit is, or will it just all of a sudden go into detonation? My viewpoint is a non-intercooled twin-turbo LSX combo has been 1,300 rear-wheel horsepower already. Plugs looking happy. C16 really doesn't care about your IATs. It's you're going to be a long ways into it before you start seeing anything noticeable on a plug because of IAT. You will notice a timing mark, and you can see the heat of the plug on the threads, and then you can determine if you're in the right spot for what you're at. So you just got to kind of look at them. If your plugs look happy, then you're good to go. You know, just keep an eye on them. And if suddenly you have a whole bunch more IAT, if suddenly your IATs go way up because you're in it longer, you're doing more boost, whatever reason, then re-look at your plugs and look at them and see where that timing mark is and make sure, hey, is it still good at 200 degrees? Is it still good at 250 degrees? Figure out where that tipping point is for your car. You're probably going to melt the IAT sensor before you really have problems with C16.
Yeah, C16 was designed as a blower fuel back in the day for 300 degree plus temperature. So, you know, it's really solid for that kind of stuff.
Don, had a quick. Oh, go ahead, John. And this is Bill. I got to sign off now. See you guys later. Have a great one.
See you later,
bye.
Hi, Bill.
Don, 20 horsepower is your number. If you're on the dyno and you've got your boost in and you're starting to you got your boost in and you're starting to work your fuel out and you're starting to work your timing in, is when you stop getting more than 25 or 30 horsepower per degree of timing, it's time to stop, take the car off the dyno and go put it on the track.
And it will react different on the track than it does on the dyno because it's a totally different load on the engine when you actually have real-world things with air resistance and the traction of the track itself. Totally different. So it's going to want – you're going to find out that if you put it on an inertia dyno, that you get 30 degrees into it and it's happy. You go to the track and suddenly it's knocking and pinging and making all kinds of noise.
So Doug Sandwig has an interesting question. Can you guys talk about input-output planning for a Holley install? He just got his Dominator in the mail, and he's looking for resources to start planning his wiring. He's got an F-body with a stock bottom N53 turbo combo on E85. Started putting a spreadsheet together, but curious if there are any resources you guys have used. Thank you. And this wouldn't really apply to just Holley. It's going to apply to any standalone EFI installation. And I usually just start by making a list of devices that I'm going to either have to control with the ECU, which would be an output, or that I have to send information to the ECU, which would be an input. And then you have to divide them out if they're 5-volt, 12-volt, ground-operated, 12-volt operated into those sections. And then I just start going down the list on the Holley as to if the J1A connector is going to go to the front of the car, well, I don't want to have one wire on the J1A that's going to a sensor in the left front and one that's going to the right rear. I try and keep them together as far as what part of the car the connector that group of wires is going to. That's how I like to do it. Go ahead.
I can share a little bit of what I do, and I build spreadsheets in Excel and label everything and put references to everything. Every little thing I do goes into it, and I can even share this here. Let me see if I can make this so you can see it. So you guys will be able to see this. This is just an Excel sheet that I made. It's nothing fancy. It's pretty boring and straight, but everything that goes in or out of my car in one way or another is listed here, And, I've got wiring colors. I've got some basic things in there. I've got like my fuse relay panel. All my stuff is in here labeled as what I do with it. My switch panel, hey, what wires are coming from it. I have a smart wire in my car. What's coming out of it? Where is it going? What's it using? The inputs, the outputs. Even at the ECU side, I've labeled things of what they're going to use, what wire colors they're getting. I'm building a brand new harness for my car. It's all new ECU for me, and I'm trying to do it as best as possible. I've always done this on cars, and when you 3 months, 6 months, a year and a half later, suddenly you decide you want to add something. You realize, oh man, I could really use some shock sensors that I didn't have before. And now you have to figure out where that stuff is. Put it in a file. You can always pull that back up. You can push it up to the cloud, Dropbox, or Google Drive, or OneDrive, or any of those services, and then you have a place you can always get to it, and you can figure out exactly what you need.
Jason Robertson wants to know what math channels or advanced math channels do you use often on the Holley?
Converter
it's
slip.
Going to be. You can do traction control through the advanced math. As a front wheel speed versus rear wheel speed versus timing retard.
Sure.
All your flex fuel stuff would be another one you use.
And there's a difference between math channels and using an advanced
advanced
ICF
table. Yeah.
Right. There's a difference there. If somebody says a math channel, then they're talking about something completely different, which is data logger only. If they're saying they're looking for an advanced table, then that's in the ECU. And then there's a whole slew of stuff you can do. I mean, a lot of guys do traction control in that section. A lot of guys, you do your flex fuel stuff in there. A lot of guys will do fueling for IAT like we were talking about. There's a whole bunch of stuff. If you're PWMing a fan, if you've got like a GM fan controller and you can do a PWM output, guys will do PWM fan controls out of that. I'm trying to think of some of the other ones we do on those things. Did I lose you guys?
No, I was just letting you go.
I was about to say about the drink.
Well, you could actually, if you wanted to, in partner with a Holly touchscreen, use the computer as a body control module. You could run your headlights, you could run your turn signals, you could run your horn, you could run your bottle heater, you could run your bottle opener. You could do that all with virtual switches on the Holly dash and run it through the Dominator and use the Dominator as a switching device. I mean, if you can think it like I want to be able to turn this on or turn this off or do this or do that in comparison to this, you can usually write a channel to do that.
So because the Holly doesn't have a fuel pressure compensation, where if your fuel pressure drops, it adds more fuel based on it, I use the advanced tables to create a table so that if my fuel pressure doesn't match 1-to-1 what it's supposed to, it adds or subtracts to it. It makes your fueling super consistent everywhere that way, because there's always going to be little fluctuations, and you can correct for that. And even as you go into boost, you notice that it's fallen down a couple PSI and not keeping up 1-to-1, absolutely, let it add more fuel to it. And then you can do your fuel safety by, you don't have to do it by fuel pressure, you do your fuel safety by the actual duty cycle, and then that table takes care of the fuel pressure issue on top of it. So if you have a fuel pressure issue, it's going to try to add to it, and if you finally run out of fuel, then you can turn it off. But you can still go back at the log and look at it and say, oh yeah, fuel pressure dropped. Oh, good thing the table was there.
Sorry, I was answering another question. Chase Griffiths he's getting ready to wire his car pretty soon. And he's planning on using the smart wire in it, but he's wondering where a quality place to source wire from. And Scott, you've got a place, and I use Waytech for wire.
Yep.
You can get a 250-foot spool for the same price as, say, like a 25-foot spool elsewhere. But make sure you use TXL wire. TXL is the automotive grade, high temperature, good Teflon. What is it? 270 degree.
So Brad taught me something about that. GXL and TXL, and there's another one. So the GXL is a little thicker jacketing. The TXL is a little thinner. So you just got to remember that the TXL is thinner jacketing on the wire. If you're running it near heat stuff, just be a little more cautious with it. But they work great in harnesses. If you got a small connection, small wires, the TXL is super flexible because of that thinner jacketing if you got to make tight corners around something. But anything in that GXL, TXL series will get you pretty good wires to use for everything. It's great for doing race car wiring. And like Mark likes Waytech. I use Waytech a bunch for stuff. They have a bunch of good stuff. I also use a place called Wire Barn because you can buy a bunch of different colors, smaller chunks of it. You don't have to buy a 250-foot spool. You can buy 25 feet, 50 feet, pretty cheap. And there's all kinds of places online to get stuff. Hell, even through Amazon, eBay, there's plenty of guys selling the wire.
Yeah, you can even actually fuel injector connection, or the place that does the timing covers, the small block Chevy 58 minus 60 minus 2.
EFI connection. They'll sell wire by the foot and it's okay if you only want, they've got really, really good selection of colors and colors with tracers and, 20 gauge, 18 gauge, 22 gauge. They've got a really good selection, but if on a per foot basis, the either the Waytech, and I just buy the big spool because we go through a lot of it, but I haven't looked at the Wire Barn yet that Scott has talked about. So
lots of colors, easy to pick from. It's great for when you need a small chunk.
I was teasing Larry Norman on Mixler. He wanted to know how far is too far for 93 octane pump with 1,000 cc of meth injection. He's been 890 at 158 in a 3,650 pound Fox body. Some are saying I shouldn't do it anymore. Some say it's fine. He's 11-1 compression, 6 liter with rods and pistons, daily driver. He's considering a flex fuel sensor on his Dominator. And I told him, I said, well, Larry, just keep turning it up until it melts everything and then rebuild it and back it off one notch. And I was teasing him, but he said that that happened. The motor ended up with molly-faced rings and half the molly flaked off. But the long story short is that it's been put back together with steel top rings. The only issue with the motor when it came apart was the molly flaking off the rings. No signs of detonation or anything. I wouldn't push it any harder than that. You know, if you want to push it, get the 93 out of it and put Q16 in it, you know, or C16 in it. There's no point to try pushing it on 93. Keep it conservative and let it live. I mean, you're making retarded amounts of power. You're going 890s already on 93 octane. If you want to turn it up at that point, just pull the 91 out and put in C16, and then you don't have to worry about having to rebuild it again. That's my thoughts on it.
Hey, just a change of pace. Go ahead.
I was going to say, what system is he running? Because me personally, I'm not a huge proponent of the flex fuel stuff on the Holly side of things, just because it doesn't work super great. It's not as accurate as you would want to rely on it, basically.
Yeah, that isn't clear. I just was from a standpoint of how far is too far with 93 octane. I think he's already there. And if you want to go further, just take the 93 out and put in C16 for the back.
Yeah, I agree. But I think he said something about adding a flex sensor as well. So
yeah, that was at the end. He said he was thinking of doing I wonder if he's thinking about E85 or something.
Yeah, I would assume so. I mean, E85 is also a good option if he has a fuel system already. However, you know, if it's definitely the cheaper route to just put fuel in it, you know, because the tune-up's not going to change enough, you know,
for as often as
C16 in it. Yep.
For as often as you're at the racetrack, you could just put C16 in it, you know, a little here and a little there. It's not even going to be that bad.
Yep.
Just to give a little change of pace, and because somebody on YouTube said, hey, is anyone checking over here? Yes, I'm looking over there. Angel M on wheelie bars, what is a good distance height between left and right? That's going to depend on the chassis on your car. If you got a really, really stiff chassis and it doesn't twist, then you can find that it'll be pretty even. Some cars you need a little bit of difference. Sometimes it's a 1/4 inch, sometimes ½ inch. What you need is whatever doesn't steer you, right? Because when you launch and you hit those bars, if it suddenly pushes you to one side or the other, then you need to adjust them so it doesn't.
Back on the wiring, Scott. We had a customer, listener here wanting to know solder or crimp, and if you crimp connectly, crimp. Solder makes the wire brittle where the solder ends, and vibration will cause it to break.
Yep. Your crimp connection is always going to be stronger than a solder connection, and if you want a perfect example. The work I do as my day job as a sound guy, we suspend hundreds of thousands of pounds of things over people's heads so they can go watch concerts. We suspend them using steel rope with a crimp connection.
How about
I was going to say a proper crimp is actually stronger than the wire itself.
Right.
And if we're missing questions here and there, trying to flip back and forth between Mixler and Facebook and YouTube, I apologize, but they're coming in pretty fast, and we're trying to keep up. If we miss your question, you can always ask it in the RealTuners Facebook page, and we can answer via text. You know, if we miss your question, we can always answer via text later.
I see one I like here from Greg Breton. How would you guys feel about spraying a 75 wet shot in a turbo setup to lower IATs? I love double power adders. Let's talk about that one for a second.
So in turbo, I don't like to do them wet. I like to keep them dry, and you can spray it kind of a ways upstream to get the cooling effect. If you're just spraying into the motor, you're not getting the cooling effect really. You get a little bit,
I don't necessarily think you need a 75 shot either. That's a bit much.
A 25 goes miles, or a 50 shot. You got to remember with the turbo, if you double the atmosphere, you're basically going to be doubling what that shot is going to do. So if you put 15 pounds of boost in the motor, you spray it with a 25, it's going to act like a 50 or even a 75 in what it puts out.
Not to mention the amount of IAT effect you get. So sometimes it's even
it's
more.
It's going to make a lot more power just from the IAT being colder. Yeah.
Yep.
150 shot on Joe Gerard's car picked up 340.
Yeah. Big
nice.
Yeah, we got a dry shot in the waiting, just sitting there, and just got to get a clutch to hold it. Can't wait for it. I'm dying.
My very first nitrous experience many years ago, I put a single nozzle 100 horse fogger on my Grand National in the intake elbow, right as it turned into the throttle body, and that was quite a bit of fun. And it was never dynoed, but I know it was a lot more than 100 horsepower. We'll just say that, and it's because of the intercooling. I'm building coilovers for a 3,400-pound Volvo station wagon with a LSA. Any recommendations for spring pound weight to start with? Not expecting an exact answer, just some guidelines.
Well, we got to know the ratio front to weight. We got to know how much each corner weighs. We got to see how it responds. There's a lot of factors there. It's not just that's a real hard one just to say start.
Yeah. Even the angle that the shocks are mounted at will have an effect because of the leverage that the suspension has on the spring. I would probably talk to the shock manufacturer after you get some corner weights. When you're mocking it up, just use a swedge tube with a couple of Hymens and get everything mocked up at ride height and everything, and then put it on scales, and you can get your corner weights and everything, which are going to be very close, other than the difference between the shock and spring package versus a swedge tube and rod ends. But you're going to have good corner weights at that point, and you're going to have all your dimensions measured out, and you'll be able to get the springs very close at that point. Speaking of fuel pressure, I'm setting up a customer car to take to his preferred tuner. Stock bottom end LS3 Corvette with twin turbos, using a dual 450 pump setup, stock E38 ECM. What is your take on wiring both pumps full on all the time versus using a Hobbs switch? The car will be on E85 with 1300 cc injectors.
That's all going to depend on the regulator used and the return line size. I'm not a real big proponent of running them full time all the time, especially if the car gets driven a lot on the street, because it will heat the fuel up a lot. So we always like to stage them.
Also depends on what pumps you're using, because if you use a brushless pump, you're putting a little less heat into it than if you're using one that's a standard pump.
I think they said it was Walbro 450s. Is that what I heard? Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, hang on a second. Now, Jason Hankinson is saying there's no sound.
No sound where?
Yeah, where are you guys not hearing sound?
I just
refresh your page.
I got sound.
Yeah, refresh your page. Something might have happened on your laptop. He probably can't hear me.
It went blank here for about 10 seconds for me too. So.
Yeah, maybe I'm having an internet glitch here.
Everybody take a drink.
Too late.
Are we back up?
Oh, I'm watching it. It's definitely still going. It's just maybe I had an internet glitch or something.
Kenny Howard says he's got something. So.
Well, back on that topic of the E38, if it's in a Corvette with E38, it probably does not have a fuel pump control module, so it does not monitor fuel pressure. So with them staged, whenever that secondary pump kicks in, you're always going to have a little bit of a rich spike, because the fuel pressure regulator has to react to that sudden surge of, oncoming fuel, which is usually, not an issue, but, the tuner will just have to know not to yank too much fuel out of that particular area whenever it kicks in, so that, don't have a big dip in your fuel curve. Now, some of the other late model GM stuff, they've got, fuel pump control modules that monitor fuel pressure, and they do a fuel injector pressure differential within the ECU. So if it sees a little bit of a pressure spike, it'll compensate automatically with lowering pulse width from the injector. So fueling should stay fairly consistent all the time. So, but yeah, I always like to stage the big pumps like that, because we've had issues in the past of, really superheating the fuel up, and, hot fuel will actually change your tune up some. Injectors flow a little bit differently. Everything just doesn't work as good hot. So,
and it gets hot pretty fast too.
Yeah.
Happens.
Yeah. I think, I forget who I was talking to, but you could pretty much calculate the wattage used by those Walbro pumps. They pull, anywhere between 25 and 30 amps a piece, depending on what voltage you've got them at. And once you calculate the wattage, it's about equivalent to putting a 60 to 75 watt light bulb into your fuel when they're actually running. So you got two of them running all the time. That's two 60 to 75 watt light bulbs sitting in your fuel, heating it up. So
James, we got ourselves in trouble here, because the Corvette twin turbo will have the 4 regulator kit with a -8 line, and James is actually the preferred tuner. So I hope you're clear on what you prefer.
Right. Well, just tell him to PM me.
You hear that, Matt Sanford? Give him a private message. Oh, sound is back. Do we have time to talk to Mr. Matt Jasek about his land speed card? Because that was actually what we were going to do, and it's 8:58, and we haven't even talked to him yet.
Yeah, let's talk to him for a few minutes.
Yeah, so we just we're in this month's, or the March issue. It's not really this month's Hot Rod magazine, but just got a little spread and a partial story. The digital story is a little more lengthy, kind of basically our whole land speed career and racing career all summed up in a few paragraphs, which was kind of nice. But the Top Speed Challenge article got printed, and it was really good stuff. Finally got a cover shot on Hot Rod magazine. You need a magnifying glass to see the car, but hey, I made it on the cover of Hot Rod magazine. It was a 7th time in the magazine, and finally got on the cover. So it was a kind of bucket list item for us, amongst other bucket lists that took place for that race. Breaking 220 miles an hour. We've been trying to do that for about 12 years now, and finally got the right combo, and all the winds going in the right direction. So it was pretty good.
So I haven't seen the cover. Is this photo of the car at speed, or is it just a small photo?
No, it's all 3 winners kind of parked in a little triangle, and it's just in the strip bar across the top of the magazine. Because unless you're Larry Larson or somebody like that, you're not getting on the cover of Hot Rod magazine. So
right.
Yeah, unless you got a high dollar engine that you put on the front cover, or somebody, a big drag week guy, heavy hitter, you're not getting on the cover of that magazine. So just a little dot on the top is good.
No, I fully understand that situation.
Yeah. So, what, you guys got questions? I mean, what do you want to know? What do we want to talk about? I guess what direction you want to go.
So
how did kinds of stuff. I
have a question. How did you end up land speed racing rather than drag racing?
So back, let's see, about 12 years ago, almost 12, 13 years ago, my brother was working at a performance shop in Durham, North Carolina. And one of his customers started doing the standing mile with his drag car. He was actually one of the first Hot Rod Top Speed Challenge winners back in 2005. So I ended up going to one of their first races of the year in 2005. And back then I had a 04 Mach 1 Mustang. And basically there's some other guy wanted an 05, the new body style back then. And, he was running like 142. I was like, man, I can outrun that dude, no problem. So here it is the week later, we're putting a 4-point roll bar in the car, and we're at the next race knocking down records, literally. That's kind of how that started. We were drag racing in the Camaro now that we run now was a drag car originally. We ran 1099 back in 97 or 98, just with a 355 and two nitrous plates stacked on top of each other. So that was a good learning curve for that one.
And what would you say the differences are as far as setting the car up for drag racing versus land speed? Because obviously with drag racing, you're keeping the suspension loaded the entire quarter mile, and with land speed, it's not the same way. So what are some of the differences that you do?
So, I mean, really at the end of the day, there's no traction getting the car going. Once you get it up, about 100 and 120 miles an hour, then, you're pretty much hooked up if your suspension is dialed in. But the most difficult thing is just getting the car up to speed versus drag racing where, they put glue down to get you going. There's absolutely no traction. Usually the tracks, it's an old airport runway. It's dusty. It's dirty. They're not going to go out there and sweep 100-foot wide by 2-mile long runway to get you good traction. So that's one of the biggest issues is just trying to get hooked up down low. And, you're either using traction control or a lot of throttle control. Big powered, big nitrous guys or big turbo guys, you got to ramp the power in with mile per hour is kind of the biggest thing. That's what we're doing right now. We had some traction control issues. So we're just ramping the power by mile per hour. Once we hit about 130 or so, it's all in as much as it'll go because we know the car is hooked up just basically with our downforce and stuff that we make.
Say our live video just dropped off. Are we done, Scott?
No, it should still be going.
Okay, because it said the live feed has ended.
It's got to be an internet glitch going on over here. I'm sure I'm having some kind of internet issue tonight or something.
Oh, okay.
It definitely hasn't ended.
Gotcha.
Or it's just on your computer or something because it's still playing on mine.
Well, it's back now. It was a brief deal, so I didn't mean to interrupt you, Mike.
No, you're good. Not a problem. Yeah. So, the other difference too, a lot of guys, the best thing I love is when a drag racer shows up and just, has their drag race tune up in. And I will tell you 9 times out of 10, they scatter their engine right about the half mile. They show up with all the timing and, usually terrible aero. They're like, man, I run 160, 170 in the quarter mile. I'm going to go like 240 out here. This is, I got 3 times the distance basically. And usually
scale up that way.
Yeah, usually about half track is when the connecting rods fall out the bottom of that thing. It's usually a good time. We had the first race we went to this year. A guy showed up with his full fiberglass body tube chassis car, and he only had a few pins in the front of that thing. So he was good till about somewhere between the quarter and the half, about a third mile, and the front end started buckling, and he just never let out of it. Literally blew the hood off, then split the front bumper in half. Then he presumed to drag the front bumper for the rest of the mile all the way down at speed. Never let out the whole way. So yeah. There's always some funny, interesting things that go on out there. Just guys that never done it before, and don't take advice. Don't listen to anybody. That's kind of the biggest thing. If you're going to get into land speed racing, you need to show up to an event and ask as many questions as you can to the guys that are going fast. Don't talk to anybody going slow if you plan on going fast. If you only plan on going 130 miles an hour, talk to a 130 mile an hour guy. If you plan on going 200, go see the guys that are running 240, 250 miles an hour. Those are the guys you're going to want to look at what they're doing because they know what it's, they know the game basically. And that's what we did. That's how we got started.
Are most of those guys pretty open when you go up to them and talk to them about, hey, what do you have to do to make this work to make the front end stay on, to make the car stay planted, to fight this problem? What are they pretty open to that most of the time?
Yeah, it really depends who it is. I mean, like, so we got started, and Keith Turk and David Freiberger kind of took us under their wings and basically said, "Hey, you guys are kind of struggling here." First year, we just showed up to race, and we showed up with a car. We ran for a whole season before the Camaro came about. Kind of built the Camaro and then showed up and went to race. We were just struggling, so they kind of took us under their wing and brought us to the wind tunnel with the Hot Rod Magazine Camaro. And then that was kind of like basically game changer for us at that point. But yeah, I mean, the deal is you don't really have to ask questions. It's open pits out there, and people love, most people don't mind you coming up and talking, asking a couple questions, but you just got to be visually open to looking at things you don't normally look for. Is kind of what the deal is. You just got to really look over people's cars. Like I can tell you, there's 10 things on the nose of our car that unless you really, really look at it and know what you're looking for, you won't see them. But if you come out there and you study it, you'll go, okay, that's a odd thing. That's a little bit different. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but you can look at it and see. But I can tell you right now, you can walk up to a guy like Wayne Jezel out there, and he'll talk to you all day long, no problem. You want to know how to make the engine live, what you got to do to for tune up or whatever it is, or valve train. He'll talk to you all day, no problem. He's actually a really easygoing guy, really easy to talk to. But there's lots of guys. There's some other racers too that literally won't give you the time of the day. There's a guy that his nephew is a really, really big NASCAR driver. I won't name him by name, but yeah, he won't give you a second of your time. I asked him. I needed needed a squirter or something like that for a Dominator. I can't remember what it was, or a diaphragm or something. He had one sitting around in his toolbox. I walked around and said, "Hey man, I need this to keep racing. I can't get one in town." And he's like, "Ain't got one. Sorry." And it's sitting right there in front of me. Just that kind of thing. I mean, you get that racer everywhere, but yeah, everyone's pretty open and pretty helpful for sure.
How about not necessarily car related, but tricks for the day when you go out there? What kind of things do you take that prepare you for it, that are not like spare parts, car things, that are like, you show up, what do you need besides your car and your stuff?
I mean, really, it's just like the drag strip, man. You need your car. Yeah, you just need your car and your stuff. I mean, one of the things that we're really finding, and I don't know how many guys do it in the drag racing world, but we're finding lots of things that come loose or need to double check, or just stuff like that we normally wouldn't do. So we're actually going to be, as we keep racing here, we're going to actually just get a dry erase board and just make columns on it and things to check. Like obviously you check your tire pressure, you check your lug nuts, stuff like that. But this last go round after the first race, some of the beadlock bolts started backing out on it. So, okay, well, that's a new thing I got to check now, just stuff like that, oddball stuff that you just didn't think you needed to look for, just never had that issue before. Ran beadlocks or these same beadlock wheels for 2 years. I don't know if it's the power or whatever it is, but, half the bolts on both wheels were just, they weren't hand loose, but you could see they'd separated from the actual wheel themselves. There was a gap. So, it really is just like any old drag strip. You just got to show up. The one thing you definitely need to have is some kind of alternate transportation. It is a long ways from end to end out there. We have the truck, but usually somebody's got a rental car also. The truck's online with the race car. You need a sandwich. It's a mile to go get a sandwich. That's something that you don't have the drag strip. It's a mile. And if you're at the other end, it's 2 miles. It's 2 miles end to end. It's a huge place. Usually the pit's somewhere in the middle. So to get anywhere from end to end, it's a mile. And then the pits are huge. They're gigantic. Usually it's a, airplane storage lot is basically what the pits are. So, it's 200 or 300 yards from end to end of that thing. The porta potty could be a 10-minute walk. So, alternate transportation is definitely something you need.
More than a pit bike.
Pit bike's not too bad, but yeah, you can get by with a pit bike, but yeah, you need to go get fuel. The fuel trailer's, a half a mile away. So it's not right next to the starting line where if you need a couple of gallons, they can dump some in for you. It doesn't work like that.
Kyle Hunt says one thing not to forget to pack is a big set of balls.
Right. Well, unless you go slow, unless you're drunk slow, then you ain't going to worry about it.
We've got a listener who wants to know, are there any good land speed books that you would recommend for someone that's new to it? Like some reading material they could look up to get started?
Man, that's a difficult one. There's all kinds of aerodynamic books. I can ask some questions to some guys. I actually honestly haven't ever read a land speed book. I know they're out there. I can ask my father-in-law. He's read about every land speed book there is. He's actually Joe Timney, Delaware Chassis Works. He's getting inducted to the Dry Lake Hall of Fame here this year. Just got his inductee notice, so that's kind of a big thing. So I can might be able to answer that question next week for you. So look back for it. I'll try to mention next week. But you can actually just Google search some land speed racing. One of the best articles out there for aerodynamics, as far as just your everyday pickup magazine, Hot Rod Magazine, took their Camaro to the wind tunnel, and there's some good just general information in there. The thing is, when it comes to land speed racing, every single car is different. Unless you're running the same car as somebody else, every car that somebody races is completely different. What works on our Camaro definitely won't work on somebody's Fox Body Mustang. Everything is really, really dependent, and especially when you start getting over 175 miles an hour. It's just game changing how different everything is. Some general setup stuff is kind of changeover, but when you start going into trying to dial in your aero or just engine cooling, how much aero I need to go in the front, anything like that, it's really, really dependent on what the chassis looks like, what kind of car you're running.
Daryl White says there's a book called Speed Duel by Samuel Hawlu. I don't know how to pronounce it, but anyway, he says that book's pretty good.
Okay. Yeah, Daryl White, I think I see a 2 Club shirt. Oh, yep. I see a 2 Club shirt in his picture. Hey, Daryl, how you doing? Yep.
I think we're probably getting to the end of our broadcast here. I don't see any new. I'm only watching Mixler and Facebook. Has anyone been keeping an eye on YouTube?
I've been looking at YouTube and no real new comments. It's kind of stale over there. Nothing
Kind of tapering off.
Yeah.
Okay. Should we? Did we get everything covered, Mike? I didn't cut you off, I hope.
Yeah, no, we're good. Yeah, I can come up with some more stuff for next week. Yeah, we were mowing along there pretty good without me talking. So
yeah, they were coming in pretty fast there, and then all of a sudden it was 9. So, but Greg Britton says he's going to attempt 200 miles an hour and a half, and that was some helpful information. So, and then Kyle still wants to know, Bewley, is your car for sale yet?
It's nice enough not having Rye around aggravating me about that. You really don't have to pick up where he left off.
At some point, John, is there a possibility we could get a picture of this car to put it up on the slideshow? Because I'd like to see it.
Oh, it's nothing to look at right now. Its body's all messed up from the wreck back in 2000. So it's ugly. It's ugly, but yeah, I've got some pictures. I got some pictures of it back in the day when it ran in NMRA as well. Phil Hines has definitely kept her successor in a lot better shape than this one.
All right. Well, I think we'll call that a wrap here tonight. At some point I'll get this up for you guys to be able to download. It may not be tonight. I got some plans here after the podcast is done. I won't have time to put it up, but I'll get it up soon, and I'll post the link.
I would like to thank John and Mike and Mr. Evans, and James, Tom Sewell. I'd like to thank you all for being on and helping us out tonight.
No problem.
You're welcome.
It's a pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
All right.
Have a good night, everybody.
Yep. With that, I'll say good night, and we'll see you next week. how to tune electronic fuel injection live in person with the guys from RealTuners? We have 2-day courses in dyno shops all across the country. You can register for these at RealTuners.com and click on RealTuners Live Classes. For more information or to make a reservation, go to RealTuners.com or message us on Facebook at RealTuners LLC. Now, about those classes. When are they, you might ask? Standalone EFI Level 1 at Norwalk, Ohio on January 19th and 20th at Busher Racing. Mopar Factory ECU training, January 26th and 27th at Trick Pro Motorsports in Palm Bay, Florida with Rick Tapp. Standalone EFI Level 1 course, February 23rd and 24th in Las Vegas at Revolution Street Cars. On March 2nd, a special 1-day advanced course at Dynocom Industries in Fort Worth, Texas. April 13th and 14th, a Level 1 EFI course at Endless Performance in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. April 27th and 28th, an advanced class at 417 Motorsports in Springfield, Missouri. May 18th and 19th, standalone EFI Level 1 class at 417 Motorsports in Springfield, Missouri. June 15th and 16th, a Level 2 advanced course in Milwaukee, Wisconsin at Endless Performance. And of course, we will be trying to schedule more classes and more dates throughout the year, so keep checking back for more info.